Hello, everyone. Today we have Ramya Prabhakar, Principal Product Manager in a tech company. She's also Ph.D. in computer science and passionate about cloud computing and storage products. Welcome, Ramya. I'm so excited to have you here today on the podcast.
Hey, Inna, thank you so much. Glad to be here.
We are talking about career pivots. What got you here won't get you there because things change in our careers and we have to change as well. And that's something that Ramya learned from her experience. So we're going to delve deep into that. Now, Ramya, let's start with this. What was that first moment when you realized in your career that you actually wanted to change? You wanted to change your career, you wanted to change your career path, you wanted to pivot. When was that moment? And how did it come up for you? How did you make that decision?
Before I made the switch, it was like everyone else. I graduated from college. I started my professional journey as a software engineer, and I was following the conventional track. I was also performing very successfully as a technical lead for a new initiative, and things were going really great. So the reason I wanted to change was not because I found my existing role hard or existing role difficult, but it was heavily motivated by the curiosity to learn things where I want to expand and grow. And that was primary motivation. In engineering roles, where I was an individual contributor, most of my focus was on solving technical challenges. I would go deep, understand the root cause of the problem, fix it, and then move on to the next challenge. In that process, I realized what I was actually completely missing out was how are our customers using the product? What are their challenges? Is the code and the architecture we are building around the software product making sense in the real world? Some of those questions were not answered, and I wanted to grow into that space. And that's the reason I started digging more about what product managers do. What is it that they are responsible for? How do they bring value to the company and such? The primary motivation was that, and the decision didn't happen overnight. I did speak to my manager. I had a very good rapport with him and expressed my interest. And believe it or not, his first reaction was, "You, of all the people, you're a top performer on my team. And like, what's happening? What is it that we can do to keep you here?" And the conversations were all around, let's not dig deeper into that. Let's get you back on track with what's like his read was that there was an issue with my current project or role, and he wanted to change that for me, all with a good intention. Then I convinced him over many more meetings that the reason was such, and he, in fact, was so supportive. He encouraged me to take up a week-long product management course offered by UC Berkeley, and it was fully sponsored by the company. So I was very fortunate. I jumped onto that opportunity, took the course, and I came back to him saying, you know what, this was like the moment where I got a chance to interact with product managers from other companies, got a good feel for what Berkeley had to offer. And that is when it increased my confidence to make that switch. And from there on, that I was like more firmly grounded. That's what I wanted. And that's what my next career step would be.
Oh, I see. So you wanted to see more what the business side or what the client side was. You wanted that proximity and get a full picture of what was going on. And it's interesting that the first reaction you got from your boss was like, no, let's fix the problem. You stay. We had a plan for you. Let's keep going. But then when you explained that to him, what you really wanted, then he actually supported you to the extent of sponsoring that training. I'm also curious because when you were in your technical role, you had an idea or of what that product management role would look like. Was that based on your relationship with product managers? Did you talk to some product managers to see what that looked like? Or was it more like a theoretical idea of what that was? How did you understand or clarify what that role would really entail for you before you actually made that big decision?
Great question. So the answer is I did work very closely with the product manager for the project I was working on. As I mentioned, I was the tech lead for the project, and I would very often interact with product managers on organization discussions, what has the most impact in terms of business, in terms of customer satisfaction. So I did get a sneak peek into the role, but to be honest, I had they say grass is always greener on the other side. I had a very naive approach to how product management worked until I actually made the switch and started working in that role full time. But I'm very glad with the decision I made. And this is something I've been super passionate about. So I made it work.
That's interesting. I found it fascinating that you only later came to realize the maybe not so sexy side of the role, which is something that usually people don't broadcast anyways. And we're not looking for those things either, but you did eventually find out. But otherwise, the benefits outweigh the negatives.
I think there were two things that I went through in this journey of switching from engineering to product management. One is there were a lot of brick walls that I had to cross to actually make the switch happen. I did mention that my manager was super supportive, but it did take quite a while for official switch in title within the company because of all the other commitments I had in terms of projects. Before the switch, there were many instances where I was tested to make sure that I really wanted it badly enough. And then after the switch, also, like I said, it was a lot of learning on the job. I made sure that I worked really hard to understand what the new role is, what the new expectations were. The mindset change was something I had to learn the hard way. And that is why I kept thinking to myself, like, oh, what got me here or what made me successful up until that point was not working exactly the way I thought it would after I made that switch, because it was initially difficult to understand new role, new expectations, new mode of working in that sense.
Oh, so you said that you were tested several times before you were given the title. What does that mean? How were you tested?
I had to, for some time, do both the roles in some sense to make the gradual transition happen. And looking back, I feel that in some sense it worked in my favor. That let me understand the new roles and expectations better before I made the official switch. But those times were when I was thinking to myself, is this a way the company is testing if I'm still interested? Or there were a lot of doubts. I found that I had to perform really well in both the roles, which stressed me quite a bit. So those were the things I had in mind when I said testing times, if their way of making sure that I really wanted it before I officially got that role.
And is there anything that you did or said or any conversation that you had where you demonstrated that motivation that was there? How did you convince people that, yes, this is not a short-term thing, like I actually really want this and I'm committed to this and to learning this new area, this new role?
There were a couple of things that were very different from my previous role. So the doubts folks had if I would perform well were specific to that. For example, in the role of a product manager, it is very common for us to spend a lot of time in meetings. When you're in engineering as an individual contributor, you're not really spending so much time in meetings. You're expected to either code or design or solve a particular problem. In product management, that you're successful depending on how well you can work with other stakeholders, which means you are in a lot of meetings. The other thing I see as the biggest difference is context switching. Because you're meeting with that many different people from legal, you're meeting people from finance, you're meeting people from customer support, engineering, executive leadership, in each of these meetings, there is a lot of context switching that happens. And that is, again, an area where a lot of people, if you're not really passionate about, can get lost and not be able to perform to their best. So these are some of the areas where, there were doubts if I would be able to quickly adapt to the requirements and deliver things on as the project demanded. And I worked really hard. I was passionate about it. So I was able to prove myself and my interest in the role, which convinced executive leadership that I'm someone who they could rely on and count to deliver things, which made that transition happen.
All right. How did you prove to them, and how did you demonstrate that interest in the role?
It was a gradual transition because it was a move within the company that gave me that time and space to show them over time that I'm someone who can deliver things as promised. It was my manager who vouched for how I worked in my previous role, and he said that we could rely on her. One thing that did change during those 6 months when the transition was happening was there was a reorg and I had a different manager. And when that happened, it was extra difficult for me to prove myself to my new manager, who was still not used to my way of working, but was open. But he knew very well that I was going through this transition. I did have his support, but there were times where it demanded a lot from me, working 12-hour days, more than 40 hours a week to make sure that I did deliver as promised. And many times results speak for themselves. I was able to show that I really meant what I wanted. It worked.
Yeah, that's fabulous. And that situation of having to prove yourself again, right, to every new manager that comes in, it is tough because it takes a lot of time to build that trust and to build that rapport and to demonstrate the results all over again. Now, I'm curious to know if that manager, the first one and the second one, once you transition to the new role, were you still reporting into the same kind of manager position, or was it a completely different manager? Was it a third manager?
It was a third manager.
While you were leaving the team.
Yes, I was leaving the team and I reported to a different org. Engineering and product management, where I worked before, were like completely different orgs. And so the reporting chain was different.
Okay, so from the moment you approached your original boss and asked him about this change, that you wanted this change, it took you 6 months to complete the transition?
It took me more than 6 months, a little over 6 months to make the transition happen. As I said, I spent initial few weeks, almost the first 4 to 6 weeks in the course I did at Berkeley and learning about what it entails and convincing my manager that's really something I'm passionate about and I want to make that switch. And then once the new manager came in, I did negotiate that I slowly started to let go of my engineering responsibilities and take more and more of product management responsibilities. That's the luxury I had because I made the switch within the same company. There are different ways I have seen folks make it work. What I did is one way of doing it. Other ways would mean going back to college. They pursue either an MBA or a business focused degree, which gives them the background necessary to do the job, and then make a switch completely in a different company. That's another way of doing it. If you're really passionate about making that happen, I'm sure folks will figure out one way or another, and this is what worked for me.
Yeah, but it's faster if you just ask for it. When you approached your boss to request this change in career pivot, did you have any concerns? Did you expect him to support you, or did you worry that maybe he might be stressed out because you were essentially going to leave the team and he relied on you? How did you feel about approaching your boss that first time?
Actually, when you spend a lot of time doing a PhD and researching on different topics, we are trained to do the analysis on both the sides, right? It's like playing a chess. What if he says yes? What if he says no? That's the mindset I went into that important meeting I had with him. In some sense, I was afraid of what it like. I didn't want him to get the impression that I was not interested in my current job. And that's why I wanted the switch. I was performing really well. I was very passionate about what I was doing. And this was a move that was motivated to expand how I thought about business and how products were put to use in real world into the hands of the customers, how they got it, how they experienced it. So that's how I messaged it. I made sure to tell him that updates of that week were great and I was doing well. And as a next step, as my next career progression, I had this conversation. So I did go in thinking if he just outright gets angry, what would be my reaction, to him being concerned about whether I was making an informed decision or not, right? Most managers, many managers, majority of them care for their reportees and want to guide them in their career progressions. His concern was valid. He gave me time to think. He was obviously surprised when I first said that, but then he was supportive. So it was like a good conversation. And I'm glad I took that bold step and didn't just keep it to myself and didn't ask for it. I would be in a totally different role doing something totally different if that conversation didn't happen, right? I'm very glad that it worked out for me.
You seem to have prepared to some extent for that meeting.
Yes.
You said there was like chess going on and some Ph.D. mental dynamics of preparation to go for this meeting. So how did you prepare? And when you got to the meeting, how did the meeting go? Did you conduct that conversation with your boss? Was it at the end of a check-in meeting, or was it the full meeting dedicated to this one topic? How did you go about actually making that conversation work?
I had, and even now, I have weekly one-on-ones with my manager. So the conversation typically is around how the week is going, any blockers that are impeding my work, anything that I have to update on something that went well. And we talk in general about, so it was not, the very first meeting was not really a planned one with a set agenda. I went in with a regular weekly one-on-one and I asked him for his opinion on what would it entail, or does he know anyone who has done this before? And this is where my thought was. It was more like an explore call to get to know what his reaction would be and how to navigate this whole process. I knew from the beginning that it was not a small thing I was asking. It was a major decision. And I also needed the time to understand how to make it work. So the very first meeting was not with a set agenda or a dedicated one. But later on, we've had dedicated sessions where he wanted to know more and I had more to share about the transition.
Okay, so you broke the news somewhat casually. You kept it in the conversation. You were analyzing his response to it, and there was no commitment yet on any side, but you were sharing your interest and what you were thinking, and you were seeing how he responded to that. And then from there, did he schedule a follow-up conversation to go deeper into it and see possibilities, or did you bring it up again? I'm just trying to analyze and understand the whole process, because I've been in situations where I brought something up that I wanted with my manager and he completely forgot about it.
No, this is something I took the initiative to make sure it stayed on top of the agenda. Follow-on meetings were like, it did seem like he had forgotten about it and it was not at the top of his mind. Obviously, he didn't want to lose a star performer on his team. And he also was trying to understand if it was just a passing thought or I was serious about it. So it was, the onus was on me to drive it, to make it happen, to follow through. And it was very easy with my old manager. And after the new manager came in, I wanted to even speak to managers 2 levels up to make sure that this was in their visibility, and the timelines that we had discussed and negotiated were honored and not forgotten about. So I took the initiative. It was on me. And I think it's our career is always like we should be the ones driving it. Managers are there for support, but the onus is on us to make it happen.
I agree. And not everyone does that. A lot of people agree with the statement that we are our own best advocates, especially when it comes to our careers. But not everyone actually acts in that way and has agency over what they want and does the follow-up, follow-through, and all of that.
For sure. It was not only that, it was since that change, I have changed 2 companies, and the main focus is where opportunities match with my interest and making sure that you're there at that time, striking the nail when it's hot. It is about finding those opportunities and making it happen. And I believe that the onus is on us to drive that.
It is, for sure. And there's definitely some element of influence that also needed to happen. Now, when you changed the whole thing, you did your course at Berkeley, so that was bringing you up to speed on some of those skills. But still, a new role there's a lot to learn, right? And like you said, everything changes. To be successful in a new role, you need different skill set from the previous kind of role that you were doing. So what else did you do to upskill yourself or get up to speed on what you needed in order to be successful in that new role?
Yeah, so my journey in the new role has also not been, oh, I landed in that with a new title and everything was smooth. It's not like a fairy tale ending. There were a lot of ups and downs, a lot of learning I had to do on the job, which was not easy at all. When I changed companies, and I've benefited from having a buddy or a mentor. They helped me get used to the new company culture and brought me up to speed with how the ways of working, right, in the new company. That was really helpful in changing how that kind of changed the pace with which I learned. I benefited a lot from the new company culture where they had a really good peer feedback platform. At the new place, they encouraged periodic feedback. So they set an environment where candid conversations were encouraged. People were told what they do really well, what they need to improve on. They're not just pointing at you with flaws and mistakes, but giving you directions on how you can improve from it, which was amazing. So back to what got me there, like up to that point, I got feedback where I was told that either I was too quiet in meetings, listening more than listening to what everybody was saying, when I was expected to make decisions or put my foot down and say, this is how it needs to be. And that was an eye-opener for me, because I always thought that I didn't consider myself silent in meetings, but that was the feedback I got.
All right, there's so many things there. I could follow up with 10 different questions right now. I'm going to go down the feedback path because that's also very fascinating. The mentor, I think it's great in having someone like that and being able to find a mentor who can give you what you need in that moment of transition is key. And you did that. So that was fantastic. It seems like it worked out. Now, the feedback part, I also did get that feedback in my career that I was too quiet in meetings. So it's always a surprise. I can imagine what you were experiencing there. And I also agree with what you said, that this company had a culture of appropriate, helpful, constructive feedback, which is not very common because most people actually don't know how to give helpful feedback. Feedback is full of biases. They're, like you said, all negative. They don't explain. They're not specific. They don't say, hey, this is the impact of what you did. It's really great that you found a place that did have that culture and that you learned from it, and something that otherwise would have hurt you and your career but also your ability to contribute fully in that new role. So fantastic. And on the topic of feedback, what was maybe the best or most difficult feedback that you ever received?
We're all creatures of habit, right? We do things that we've always been doing. And because of those habits, because of how we operate, we are successful to some extent. Like I'm here because I do things a certain way and I'm proud of it and I keep doing it. If there is no one who is going to be a mirror and showcase and say, hey, what you're doing or how you talk or what you say is sometimes can be annoying, or sometimes the way you put it, there is a better way of saying the same thing. Those are some of the things that we don't realize ourselves. And we really badly need someone who is able to share that feedback in a way that makes us want to change, right? Without being defensive about it. So I think the folks I worked with and the peer group I had at the new place, I just was very fortunate where they brought to light things I didn't know about myself. And I had the mindset to be open about what they had to say and accept that and make an attempt in changing myself. There's always things we need to change and improve about ourselves. And if anyone has the patience and time to talk to me about it, I always make sure that I have an open ear for it and see what I can do to either clarify or change myself.
Yeah, and I love that mindset. Seeing constructive feedback as, in a way, a gift. Like you said, they're spending time. If they're spending time to share something with you, to articulate something that you could improve on, in a way, it is a gift. And by, like you said, clarifying it, or at least listening to it and deciding how you want to incorporate that, is honoring that gift in many ways.
For sure, right? Yeah, so it's not there in many places. I wish they make that a culture thing in many companies so that we can all benefit from it.
Yeah, sometimes, at least for me, I had to educate people on how to give me feedback. Like you said, clarifying, right? By asking the right kind of questions to help them give me feedback that was useful and not just these vague, empty statements of judgment rather than improvement.
Right. And the other thing, now that I think about how it was different, I feel is making it more often, right? We should not have a feedback session once a year where you would have forgotten what happened 11 months back and you're just focusing on just what's at the moment. The feedback used to be like quarterly, like once a quarter. That helped to stay in context and be more to the point than just waiting for someone to improve. Oh, okay, I'm going to share this a year from now.
Yeah, not just once per year in the formal performance evaluation.
Right.
I agree. If you look back in your career, what communication skills or interpersonal skills or people skills do you wish you had learned earlier that would have helped you the most in your dealings, in your career, in your meetings, in your conversations, and whatever you needed to be the best version of yourself or advance your career or do your job to the best extent that you could?
Yeah, I don't know if I mentioned this to you earlier. I grew up in India and I came here to the US to study, and I was like first 20 years of my life were in India. Growing up there, the culture about we are encouraged to respect elders, listen to what they say, and questioning the authority. There is a way of doing it. I think I was, for a long time, too hung up on those values, which are right, by the way. There's nothing wrong, but the skills necessary in business world to be successful as a leader really rely on, it's not about agreeing to what everyone says or just being respectful. It's about respectfully disagreeing sometimes, that is required. It's part of the job. There will be conflicts. You need to resolve conflicts and put yourself in those positions, have uncomfortable conversations with seniors, with superiors, with elders. So that is something I wish I learned sooner than I did. I think sometimes I feel like I'm still learning.
I agree. That's something that I struggled with a lot earlier in my career. Dealing with authority, being able to challenge authority, disagree with authority, or anybody who I saw as authority or was superior. Speaking of hard conversations, have you experienced microaggressions?
I wish I said no, but I have. I think for the most part, majority of the people I work with have been super supportive. They're all excellent team players. There are some in every company, I'm sure, where they are a little difficult to work with. I've had a few such encounters myself, like someone not showing up to meetings or just being like too quiet when they're supposed to speak and being like showing those mic. And then sometimes during the pandemic where you are always on Zoom and you're on remote calls, someone getting too worked up during a meeting and just ending the call abruptly. Such weird things have happened occasionally, very rarely, but there are all kinds of people we have to work with and deal with. And although at first it is very disheartening and it feels like our natural thinking is, what did I do? What did I do wrong? What annoyed that person? Right? There have been a couple of instances where I have realized that person was not just hard on me. They are just like that. They are like that with many more in the company, which a lot of people find annoying. In that sense, it felt, okay, I'm not the one at fault here. And then the next step would be to figure out how to work with them, right? It's not about just quitting that team or quitting the job, staying in and making it work, which I did. And there have been instances where they've come back and apologized. There have been instances where they have changed teams, so all kinds of things. But it does happen.
Those are interesting situations. And the important thing that you did was you didn't isolate yourself and stay in that guilt or, oh my gosh, it's me, it's all about me, I'm the problem here. And by not isolating yourself, you got some input, you got some perspective, and you may even have gotten some guidance as to how to deal with the situation. And then you went ahead and with additional confidence based on all of that, you address the situation. And then obviously that builds a lot more confidence in your own voice once you do have those conversations and they do apologize and they do change their behavior and you do have better interactions. So I can see that's a very empowering response that you had, because instead of staying in the, oh my gosh, it's all me, and having more self-doubt about yourself, you're able to resolve things and transform the outcome, which built even further your confidence and your voice, which is what we're here for.
Sure, yes. And that's why I just jumped on to this opportunity of speaking up. This is something very close to my heart, and I really appreciate what you are doing here with the platform. It's amazing. I'm so glad to be part of this.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ramya. We had a great conversation. I love learning more about how you career pivot, how that process was, how you had agency over the whole thing, and how you decided to learn how to deal with authority and challenge and have those hard conversations and control in a way your happiness and success in the workplace. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Great talking to you.